processing environment. And here also be covering in the lab. In all of those processes, we are not an island. For many years already, we realized that there's this whole sea of capacities in universities. We need to collaborate. We've discovered technology sources like this for all in the United States to develop processes.
In there.
So, this is for all. We've been very fortunate to be part of the API Plus program. By case, the new potential commercial process being developed there, but extremely novel technologies cutting solvents out of the reaction, really up the or improving. Okay. On the planning side, we organize and then also on the quality side, it's really audits at our facility assisted us. GIZ the same, basically that audit, and then
Okay, the API Plus laboratory is a joint venture by DS, Department of Science and Innovation, and CPT. Is on our campus facility where we can go 10 liters. Typical rat reactions. Up to 25 liters towards. This lab is open. Any university can come and join us, work there, take it through the whole process of one we've done the understanding of the process scale reactions, then we're ready to go to the pilot plant. Now, the pilot plant, we started building, well, I'll get to that slide. Generate data for the API master file. And we're currently working on our first commercial plant on that facility in Pretoria, where we are, where we will produce 40 metric tons of a commercial TB product. This is just the start. We aim larger, but that's where we are now. At the same time, we've trained a couple of capacities. So these are the products we're working on. Number of different same vision that we need to create an industry. So practice. Obviously, there's a question also of finding funding, substantial interest. But to get to this, to be a strategic partner for the formulation industry in South Africa and in the region that have the capacity to competitively backward integrate into the API that they use, which is typically the most costly element going into the final medicine. Okay, I'm going to end on the previous slides simply to show off collaborators that we have.
Thanks, mate. I think it's always fascinating to listen to Gerrit, and often a lot of the stuff that you don't hear is additionally interesting. So he talked about how they started this thing in 2014. What he doesn't talk about is that across the street from CPT Pharma, it was something they leveraged a whole knowledge and experience to move across. This is a fascinating piece as well. Processes and formulation. And years when I was running China, that's where I got a license a product to a generic manufacturer. The generic manufacturer who just replicates the multinational's process can save money by reducing margin to increase yields and decrease the contaminants as versus one of the generation ARV manufacturers at the moment. The price comparison is in the multiples of 10s, 15s, 20s, 40s to 1. Yep. So this is something to really take time over and dwell on, as to how this science can change the game. The last point I just want to make on your stuff is this comment that we often get about how African manufacture, the market's not big enough. So you saw Gerrit's number there. They're building a TB API production capacity that by the end of next year will make 43 metric tons of API per annum. The South African state tender alone for that API is 63 metric tons. So even at 43 metric tons, which is a superb business case and will do really well in terms of returning on investment, it's only 68% of South Africa's requirement. For that molecule. We have the markets. I was amazed. I was trying to read through your resume because we've never met before. You clearly a very, very smart and experienced individual. Good.
Yeah, that is fine. So I'm going to about the story of this startup. We are a startup. We research the CSR, and this is where this guy was born. And obviously morphed almost immediately. Our appearance, and you're gonna see in the next few slides. Dr. Tshepo here was my boss, and these other bosses that are also here. So And the key thing that the project seeked to achieve was to leverage South Africa data that codes for concept that pro exploration license to bioprospect almost the whole country. Deliberate because of what I'm going to tell you shortly. So the challenge of doing this bioprospecting of choice, the convergence of bioinformatics potential achieve. That is the long game. But ourselves, we enzymes system. So we embedded all the algorithms that you can think of from bioinformatics, machine learning, deep learning, and including protein prediction or so I'm just going to give you a snippet of it. So this is genomic analysis because I thought it would be easy for me to interpret because I'm neither a bioinformatician. So in essence, you can load the FAST2 file. You then choose the modules that you want to play around with. But what we did around the shilling, of which I did not a lot of data. So it's now running on. So it enables us basically whether this also for point of copies. and amplify because this is kind of mutation. So it allows us to speedily recognize pitfalls. I'm supposed to be tech savvy, yes. So among the products that we produce, really, we are informed by the market. And all these, which also underwent through rigorous changes because of the technology. And these are released in South Africa that we're looking at. And at least development. And now we are in a process of registering these and I don't believe it. Obviously, I don't work in the lab, but I don't believe it. To produce for HIV alone, we can produce about 8 million tests in 6 months. The challenge that we have is that that's a gray area, especially for diagnostics. But really, in the next in the future, we'll in-house oligo manufacturing so that we
Scott Fundy, that's great to see. But the other one was this thing that you you discover that you actually had to move to both vertical and horizontal integration in order to create business viability. But I actually think that's just a smokescreen for possibly one of the smartest business leaders I've seen operate in a startup. Petro.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ian. I'll take you up on this one afterwards. So excuse my lispel. I'm not falling asleep. That's the price you pay for MR. And if you look the Afrigen, essentially young company. We are pre-revenue earning, not build biotech without enabling product development and facilities and African continent. And I'm not going to talk about adjuvants today, but in the slide at the bottom, you'll see a little where we can adjuvant formulation license with a hard of interest to capacitate low middle income countries to have access to mRNA technology. If you look at the bottom, lightning sign, the steps was that didn't happen. So how do you build idea I hold very dearly. In the first picture here, you see Afrigen. Afrigen, December 2023, running the first tech batch. I will talk to you a little bit about the people, which is at the heart of what it takes to develop an mRNA vaccine and a GMP end-to-end. First, writing the SOP, you have to train 18 steps in the manufacturing for mRNA vaccine. Each one of these needs to be characterized, very developed, and a liter to commercial RNA. Let me pause for a moment. And today we only have one registered product. There's a technology for sickle cell anemia based on mRNA platform is phenomenal. You can actually interchange between human health and veterinary. And then I don't know how many people are aware very suitable. So a virology, which strategically was appropriate to share with low and middle income. Multi-product, multi-purpose. So let me go back to June 2021 to today's room. That was part of our Lawrence and the team were training our people on GMP tissue culture technology. There's nothing like that on the also important. Our transformation, how we represent this rainbow nation, and also the average the complex work that needs to happen in future. And then we had at university first neutralizing antibody data on R&D, investigational new drug, a COVID-19, which was in the public domain, and with the process, the convergence of chemistry and biology, much potential. So what did we do? We looked at WHO priorities, CEPI, Gavi, UNICEF, the Global Fund, and we listed the different disease priorities, burden of disease in low middle income countries. We then superimpose on that whether mRNA is a suitable platform. What is the probability of market success? And we then in the date with South African Medical Research Council, and partner is one of the fastest growing infectious diseases globally, with a 37% increase in Northern America in the last few years, and they've run out of antibiotics. There's a new one now registered, but it is about time. The gonorrhea vaccine being developed here in South Africa by Afrigen in part. It is a vaccine antigen that was discovered, and the antigen design was using an AI process. And we have now completed first preclinical work, and we hope to make an announcement with our partners in the next while. This is a vaccine which is not only relevant for Africa and low middle income countries, but for the globe. So an interesting development, a difficult one to make, but a vaccine that has public health benefit and relevance. What you'll also see in the design of these priorities, it's important for us that the mRNA platform that's being built at Afrigen with all the support and all the partners is pathogen agnostic. That's a big word. So we wanted to demonstrate that the platform is suitable for bacterial diseases, respiratory viral diseases, systemic viral diseases, and of course a parasite. So this portfolio represents that, but we haven't done the parasitic work yet. So again, for sustainability. Then we talked earlier today about delivery mechanisms. How do we innovate around delivery of these vaccines? So mRNA has never been delivered on a microarrow patch. And you know, this is future technology. A little box, a little block, which is completely thermostable. You can have 1 million doses in a box this big and distribute. This is the ideal. This is the dream. So we have already started working with Korea, with the IVI and QuadMed, to utilize mRNA can be delivering on a patch. I have to talk about the intellectual property. If you talk about mRNA, you have to recognize the complexities and really, really great support we're getting from the medicines patent pool to understand this landscape, to understand the trends. What is happening in the last 2 years? Suddenly, patents are being filed in low middle income countries where it's never happened before. So increasingly, we be crowded out unless we innovate and we find ways to work around that IP or create partnerships where we can voluntarily license a complex component of the mRNA work that happens within the tech transfer program. Then I have to make this comment. mRNA is not the only relevant platform. If you look at the history of COVID-19, there was 2 other platforms that almost equally fast moved and produced fantastic vaccines. It's essential for Africa that we develop multiple platforms for vaccine development, for pandemic preparedness, and for vaccine innovation. And I think my second last slide, a comment around the ecosystem. We've heard from Abebe yesterday and others how important it is that we do not develop this in a vacuum, that we have a supporting ecosystem that supports research, development, and manufacturing. And I think it's around that. And lastly, it's to say thank you. a great effort with great support from so many partners, and we salute all of them. Thank you very much.
All right, by a quick show of hands, who agrees with me? One of the smartest business people you've ever seen. Who wants to buy the shares? Well done, Petro. It's always a pleasure to listen to you talk about it, and part of it is the passion, right? It's completely invested in you, isn't it? And that's people who are building startups and developing businesses. Morena, how long did you practice medicine? 3 years only, yeah. I did 10. So we've got a very common track record. We both studied at the same medical school. We both decided that we didn't like seeing patients and we much preferred being in business. Morena is known to many of you as the Chief Executive Officer of BioVac, which has also not been a smooth ride and has had its hills and it's had its headwinds. So Morena, come and talk to us about BioVac.
Thank you, Ian. In actual fact, I tell my PA whenever I fly that the doctor element must not be there. Mr. Morena Makhoana, because when they say, is there any doctor in the house? I said no, because I haven't touched a patient in more than 20 years now. So I think as my slides get put up, many of you know about BioVac. I'm not going to talk about BioVac specifically. I'm just going to talk about one project that we have, which is the oral cholera project that we are busy with. So we're midway through. And so I can't say that, it's all success, but it's just to take us through the journey. Hopefully at some point we can come back and say, what did we learn? Well, firstly, why did you enter into the project? But also, was it a successful project? So I'm just going to give you a bit of a taste of the oral cholera project, which I think I'm hoping that at the end of it, we will all want to have more of such projects in the country, so that we have end-to-end vaccine manufacturers. I think they're still loading the slides. Okay, anyway, whilst they're loading the slides, I think many of you know about the concept of the innovation chasm. So you'll hear about the innovation chasm, you'll hear about the valley of death. So you start and you get excited. I was hearing Daniel saying you do this, and then the market tells you something else. So even in product development, and I think I'm probably talking to the converted here, you start in preclinical, you start in a lab, whether it's in a company or in a university. You then say, okay, I think I have something here. I think I have something. And then for whatever reason, South Africa has just, we just haven't taken the product through. Sometimes we do take it to clinical trials, limited examples, but we've just never taken a product through from preclinical right through. And there's just this innovation chasm where the ideas start and they are great, but for whatever reason, a lot of it being funding, just doesn't come through. And then we get these helicoptered products that are coming with clinical trials, which is good, but then we've lost that because the development happened elsewhere. So one of the things that we've been wanting to do, and when I say we, I think the community has been wanting to do, is to develop products and really take them through. So as the slides are going to be put up, when I talk about cholera, I think let's talk about the failures first in terms of, we're talking about doing end-to-end vaccine, and BioVac from the longest time has wanted to do end-to-end vaccine. And why are we now having a project that hopefully has a better chance of success? That's because there were other failures. So let's talk about that, okay? Because the world is not perfect. So cholera in itself is a bacterial, as you know, it's a bacteria. So a lot of the technology that when you develop a vaccine, you follow what is in the ecosystem around bacterial vaccine. So BioVac started actually shortly after BioVac started in 2003. In 2006, it actually was developing a vaccine against Haemophilus influenza B, which is another different virus. At the time, the Hib was scarce, liquid Hib was a bit scarce, and there was a lot of excitement globally about this product. That was our first foray into real product development. 3 years later, the project stopped because the market had shifted, okay? And there were a lot of funding just dried up. So that was our first attempt to get into product development. And I think it's important to also understand what we hardly refer to research in BioVac because we're not in research. And we admittedly, actually even the department that you used to call R&D, we're not calling it R&D, and we actually call it science and innovation because we're not in research, and we just admit that we're not in research. Universities will be in research and big pharma will be in research, but we are not in the research space. We're in product development. So once the concept is there and it's been validated somehow, we then take it on and we want to run with it. So anyway, so we developed it, but we didn't commercialize it. 2 years later, we then ended up a small project about doing a pneumonia. It was not a pneumonia vaccine. It was to train a Chinese counterpart, but it doubled. It allowed us to at least play around with a different antigen. Being the pneumococcus. And so, okay, we had this lessons from him, but it never materialized into a real project. A few years later, we then ended up landing up a big project, Group B strep GBS. And that was a big project, and we got excited and said, okay, hopefully this is now our dream is going to materialize. 3 years later, the funding dried up. The funder decided to fund a US-based company, and then we were snubbed. So again, so by the time COVID hit, we still didn't have a project that would take us to end-to-end. In actual fact, we're in a very difficult position because we had a product development team that had grown from 12 to 40. And with the lack of funding, how were we going to support it? Now that the funding had dried up. Anyway, now come then the oral cholera project, which is what I'm going to be telling you about. But anyway, I just want to say that as we put up slides, there's a lot of drama behind the scenes on things that are just not working. And that's life, and I just wanted to say that the slides look beautiful, but the real life experience sometimes is not that great. This slide, and I think, many of us in the room use different slides about the ecosystem and how, and how products get developed. But I think it goes back to what I was saying, that we are all in research and development in different ways, and it takes a while, as they say in this slide, 9 to 14 years. You then get into really getting the product towards registration, and then you get into end-to-end manufacturing. This is the ideal world, okay? Now, if you have to take on the continent, and I think all of us know that we have limited capacity, especially where there are some fill finish, maybe with the exception of freeze drying, that is there on the continent. But everything else, we're completely thin as a continent, if it even exists. And so this project that I'm going to tell you about, whilst it's not in research, but it tries to tick as many of these boxes going forward. And as I said, we're midway, so I'm not saying that the boxes are ticked, but we're midway in terms of hopefully coming back and say, hey guys, with the exception of research, I think we've ticked these boxes. But again, we're midway, and as we know, there's lots of risks around this. So cholera, I think I won't have to tell you about the disease burden that cholera has been with us for the longest time. But in actual fact, the outbreaks are just getting worse and worse and worse. And even this country has experienced some outbreaks of cholera. We're fortunate that the technology was known. So again, we're fortunate in terms of this particular technology that we received, and we fortunately had the ability to absorb. But going back to my story, that we have the ability to absorb because we've had lessons learned. So now we can absorb better, but that's because of some of the projects that didn't succeed. We had willing partners. In this case being IVI, and I'll talk about them. And then funding is always a question mark. It can never tick the box on funding fully. Okay, so what is this project? Who are we working with in summary? So the IVI International Vaccine Institute, and some of you may have seen in one of the breakaway sessions where IVI was speaking about a lot of their projects, but we got this technology from IVI, who have been developing cholera vaccines for the longest time. So they're experienced, okay? And they've tech transferred to others. So we received from a capable partner. They're not a commercial manufacturer, okay? But then what we then need to do is to take it further on. So you get lessons that you get from IVI, but ultimately we have to upscale ourselves, and we have to and then we work with local partners. So the MRC is one of our partners in terms of clinical trials, but also IVI is also going to be working us with clinical trials, because when it comes to cholera vaccines, they are the experts. They've done so many cholera vaccines. So not only are we receiving vaccines from them, the technology from them, but we are also going to be working with them in terms of the clinical trials. And ultimately, we want to license the product. So where are we in terms of this project? So we're a long way. It looks nice on this slide that we are sort of like halfway. So we got the technology, and in a non-GMP environment, and our team needed to firstly demonstrate that they can absorb it at 2 liters and in a non-GMP environment. And then the other 2 bits are the interesting ones, because now it's under BioVac's control. Okay, BioVac upscale. Now you obviously go back to your partner and say, am I doing okay? But when you get to some levels like the 200-liter scale, that doesn't exist from our tech transfer partner. So we have to do it ourselves. Now you have to upscale and learn all the lessons. And we are at a point now that we are upscaling to the 200-liter level. And as I was laughing when Petro was talking about the daunting task of meeting SAPRA next year, we also have the daunting task of meeting SAPRA, who will be auditing this facility that will be the drug substance facility. So we've been audited for fill finish and all of that. But this is the first time that we're actually going to be audited on the upstream side. API, I mean, it's never been done. So we are also as daunted as Petro is in terms of this process, because we're doing it for the first time. SAPRA has done it many times all over the world, but it will be the first time that they put a stamp, their own stamp first, before any other regulatory authority. So I don't know whether they will scrutinize us more or not, but anyway, it's going to be an interesting process, because they have to put their stamp first. And obviously we have to manufacture for clinical trials. So in this country, compared to, let's say, the US, you do have to have a GMP certificate in order to be able to manufacture clinical trials. In other countries, as long as you have the systems, you're fine. So those are some of the things that we need to do. And we're preparing to go into clinical trial at the end or towards the end of next year. We will, and all of those trials will be done locally. And ultimately, we want to license the product locally, but ultimately the product is going to be destined for global markets. That's where the need is. South Africa will use it whenever they use it. But in actual fact, when you look at other countries, cholera is actually more endemic. You know, if you talk about DRC, Nigeria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, all of those places are cholera is quite endemic, and so those are where we are. Our ultimate approach is going to be. So this is a slide that Africa CDC has. I think many of you may have caught a baby when I think in one of the sessions yesterday, or even this morning, I think, was talking about how Africa CDC went around and have a look and said, which products are actually going to make it through the finishing line in the next coming years? So there's a lot of pipeline, but which ones are going to make it through the line? So you'll see that there are a lot of South African flags. So it's our friends at Aspen and ourselves that are coming up with those products. And then we have our friends in Senegal, IPD, that are also coming up with their own products. The ones that are in dark are the ones where there's end-to-end manufacture. So our oral cholera project, yellow fever, and MR are the ones that have end-to-end manufacture. Now, if you go to other continents, I mean, the slide will be so full. But this just shows you the support that we need collectively as an industry in order that we get a lot more of darkened products that will go there. Now, again, this is just the initial list. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more pipeline, and hopefully they will renew this as announcements come through. But this is what is meant, this is what is going to come through. So I just wanted to place where our project is in the context of others that are earmarked to come between 2025 and 2030. Again, I mean, just to talk about the priority of cholera, it's on the WHO priority list. And so we're on the right mark in terms of what product to look at. My last slide is really about, I think this is probably, if there's any takeaways, probably going to be around the slide that I really want to have a look at, is that, you know, it's obviously a growing disease, but sadly so. Cholera ought not be a growing disease, but it is sadly so. So there is relevance, particularly on the continent. As I said, that we had a willing technology transfer partner. There's one thing about asking for a technology transfer and only be given a paper and say, go and sort yourself out, okay? Because you're going to spend another 2 years trying to figure out the paper. But the willing tech transfer must really be willing and be willing to work with you. We were fortunate in that we had some skills that we had developed through trial and an era where we were able to absorb the taxes that have fed us thus far. So just mention some of those there, the Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, and the likes of Open Philanthropies. Just talk a little bit about numbers, maybe in terms of where we are. For us to get to licensure, just to give you, and OCV is not the most complex. I think Afrigen has a very complex technology, being mRNA, as we all know. Okay. Now, the oral cholera, it's an activated vaccine. It's on the scale of complexity. If you have to put, okay, we think it's complex internally because we have to go through it. But if you have to put it on a map, it's not the most complex of technologies in terms of if you have to rank it. But to take this product through to licensure, from development to licensure, so far we've raised about 350 million rand, and we're burning it as we speak. And we have another 350 million rand that we better lock up in the next coming months. So it's 700 million rand. Okay, now you can convert that in dollars or euros, that we need to take this product through to licensure. And obviously, BioVac doesn't have that money, and we have to raise money. So we are really dependent externally, and most of those are international funders. And we're still going around trying to raise that money. As I said, the market is important. You need to sell it to somebody. And so some of these mechanisms that are coming with Gavi and AVMA are quite important. And ultimately, you have to work with the regulators. You have to work in an ecosystem. We're very fortunate that SAPRA is ML3, maturity level 3. So which means that they are at a level that if we want to go for pre-qualification, at least they meet the minimum standards in terms of pre-qualification. Next fact, when I'm leaving here, I'm going to WHO. We have a meeting with WHO later this week about this project, so that we can just appraise them of what's. We've been talking with SAPRA, and we've been having discussions with SAPRA, but now we'll be talking to WHO pre-qualification and bring them up to speed in terms of where we are. So quite frankly, there's a lot that one can possibly put through the slide, but I just wanted to just give you a taste of what we are busy with as a case study. And wish us luck. And if you have any uncles that have 350 million rand lying around, please, BioVac is here.
Well done. So we're actually over time, so I'm afraid we're not going to do the question thing. Unless, does anybody want to do a sneaky one? Here we go.
Getting the skills you needed to ramp up from 14 to 138 or whatever that was. Please talk to us now in anything that the system can get done to make your life easier. Quick one. No, it's not easy. So what saved us was South Africa's strong R&D capabilities. So I think in simple terms, we hired the attitude and the passion, and we trained the skills. But Afrigen, just to give an indication, 89% of our staff have diplomas or B degrees. 49% have postgraduate qualifications. So it's knowledge intensive. But my friend Sam sitting there will tell you we could not find an industrial pharmacist or a production pharmacist in this country. We took retail pharmacists, I think you've gone through the same, and trained them as industrial pharmacists. In Texas A&M, in Europe, in Edinburgh, in Korea. So the foundation was incredible, but we had to train people fast. Yeah. Now we're building experience.
That's actually a quotable quote.
Very quickly. Compliment to all of you, but especially Afrigen. It's really lovely to hear all the story from the beginning. And I just wanted to ask you, can you comment how the regulators need to receive new skills? Because these are all new technologies, so they need to be, registered. So no one did it before. So, we will hear also later on, like how we need more training, more skills, bioprocessing and everything. Well, what about regulators? We also have to say that they need to receive training as well.
Go, Prof.
Yeah, so I was at the session this morning speaking to the regulators, and one of the questions I asked was the guidelines come out. What is the path or what is the inputs of the industry in those guidelines. And you spoke about getting a document, taking 2 years to interpret what the document is going to be. And I think they did hear me. And you're right. There are capacities that we need to develop. And we have a program, UWC, that have regulators sitting in. And most of the people in the class are from, yeah. So, yeah. so, yeah, that's a secret. Don't say anymore. But we're thinking of, and I go around speaking to BioVac and the rest of them and trying to get the fourth-year students in pharmacy to see those things and to get them the things. I tell somebody I'm an apostle of the biomanufacturing industry, to get them see it early and learn something early, get into the space, see the scale of what you're doing. And hopefully in the next 10 years, we're going to have a cohort of students that will become regulators that appreciate what it takes to get to where these guys are.
Thanks very much. I'm going to call it there. I just want one last comment, which is that I actually think you guys are missing a trick in terms of capital raising and raising funding. You get so many visitors from overseas. I think you should be getting the Western Cape Tourist Board to sponsor you. Thanks very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Cheers.